What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Wednesday afternoon. And man, do we have a lot to talk about in this week's episode of Hear the Spear. First off, we're going to discuss Markeiston Douglas in and out of the transfer portal. We're going to give our take on that whole situation there. We're going to also discuss Florida State's new additions through the transfer portal, including a quarterback and a really talented defensive back. And then we're going to talk about some players to keep an eye on that Florida State is looking into and bringing on visits. And then we're also going to talk about a linebacker that has entered the transfer portal there. Florida State having some attrition on its roster. And then, of course, going over and looking at a few Seminoles that have found new homes, including Hakeem Williams, as he is going to join Deion Sanders in Colorado. We're going to give our take on that. And then we're going to finish off with the NFL draft. A lot of stuff going on there. What a wild 3 days that was in total, but a really entertaining draft overall. And then we're going to finish it off here with a little discussion over the John Gruden unboxing of all the gear. I thought that was a pretty funny video. We'll play that at the end of the stream. But with me this afternoon is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoleGameday.com, and over to the other end is Austin Veazey, our lead basketball writer. Gentlemen, how we doing? How we feeling?
It's great to be back. It's a lot of stuff has happened since the last time we got on here, obviously with the draft and, some transfer portal news, some other guys transferring from Florida State. So a lot of stuff to cover today, and excited to get into it with you guys and end off this month on a strong note.
I don't have anything to add. I'm tired. I don't know how to explain it. It's been a long week already for absolutely no reason. So it's just
Wednesday at 12:38 p.m.
What's going on, man? What's going on, Veazey? Veazey has a lady now, everybody. So that's the situation. That's the situation.
That's not why I'm tired. I'm tired because my dog keeps waking me up. But other than that.
Oh yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Well, here's the deal. We're gonna wake you up, Veazey, because we've got some awesome.
I can't wait about biscuit talk. Here we go.
This is what we're here for. April 30th, baby. This is where the fun begins. We still got a long while away before Florida State kicks off against Alabama, probably for a lot of good reasons there. But Florida State is doing a lot of work in the portal and in attrition, including its roster. Before we get started, if you're on YouTube right now, smack that like button. If you're watching after we've already gone live, definitely still feel free to hit the like button, subscribe to, and leave some comments as well. If you're here live with us in the chat, like Mike is here on YouTube, bring up some topics. If you have any questions or something you'd like us to discuss, throw it in the chat. But yes, like he said, positive vibes. I felt like last week's episode, a lot of negativity. I was pretty harsh on a lot of things. I think all of us were.
Don't expect any changes from me.
And yeah, Veazey's going to stay the same for you. And I was actually going into this episode saying, you know what, let's theme it around 3 positives to take away after Florida State's spring practices. But then Biscuit says, no, you do not get to do that. I'm going to enter the transfer portal, which he did on Saturday. Florida State's former veteran tight end, now I guess you could say current veteran tight end. He entered the portal on Saturday, then took his name out of the portal yesterday. On Tuesday, if we go all the way back to the very beginning, he entered the transfer portal and joined Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State last season. Things did not go as expected, like he thought it would. So he decided to enter the portal, come back to FSU, which he participated in this spring. And then over this last weekend, enters the portal. Now he's back on Tuesday. Gentlemen, first off, I think all of us on here have been very high on this tight end room. We think it's probably one of the most talented groups on this team going into next season. And if you're going to take a hit here, okay, you don't want it to be one of your younger guys, primarily like a Landon Thomas, or if you see what Florida State wants to do with Amari Williams, if they want to stick with him going back to tight end or not. But, Markeiston Douglas, I don't know what happened in the spring, but decided to put his name out there, and then Florida State brings him back. What are y'all's thoughts on that? And can we kind of try to figure out what Mike Norvell and the staff is doing here?
Well, I'll just say, first off, we heard pretty good things about Markeiston Douglas during the spring. He was someone that both Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn spoke very highly of. And going back to that first spring scrimmage, he actually led Florida State in receiving that day. So, it wasn't like he's buried on the depth chart or anything. This is a guy who's competing for a significant role on the offense in 2025. And, like you said, Logan, looking to bounce back after a lackluster campaign at Arizona State where things didn't go his way. But, I'm just worried with a guy entering the portal at basically the 11th hour. I mean, like that. And, putting the message out on social media. I know he never officially appeared, but the intention was there. And Florida State allows him to come back. I'm just wondering if it sets a dangerous precedent for the Seminoles where, you're going to have guys doing this type of thing, trying to renegotiate right there up until the spring portal window is closed, where, Florida State, if Markeiston Douglas was to leave, there's not really a ton of options out there at tight end to replace him. So I know it didn't go down, obviously, but it just seems like a weird precedent for Florida State to set, and especially with what we've seen in previous years, with some guys who might have or maybe not entered the portal trying to renegotiate. You go back to the Patrick Paytons and the Joshua Farmers, and obviously DJ Lundy committed to Colorado and then came back to Florida State. We've seen this happen time and time again, and I'd really like to see the coaching staff get to the point where they're a little more cutthroat. And if you have a situation like this, it's you cut ties with the player, and that's kind of it.
I was just about to bring that up. Why are we being held hostage by backup? Just as simple as that. I get he can be your second tight end in blocking schemes, but like you just mentioned last year, when you're bringing back Peyton and Farmer and all these other guys that are basically holding you hostage over crazy NIL money, and they don't really follow through on it, especially with Lundy and Pat Payton, who had really disappointed seasons last year. I don't see why you should continue to do that. And this isn't the first time that they brought back former players in the portal. Obviously, we just talked about DJ Lundy, who hit the portal and then came back. You had
visited Colorado
Cooper.
too.
Marion Cooper was the other one I was thinking of. I don't even know if he saw the field last year. At some point, you have to just say, hey, if you're in the portal, just get out of here. Granted, it's not always realistic in every situation. There's some players you'd like to bring back, but especially a guy that's already transferred away from your program once, comes back, then hits the portal again. Just let him go. It's annoying.
Mm-hmm. And looking at the tight end room too, overall, we heard a lot of good things about Chase Lofton, the true freshman coming in. All of the staff was giving some high praise to him, and I don't understand where you have a guy like this who I think Markeiston Douglas can be efficient, can be very helpful for you in this offense, definitely with what Gus Malzahn is going to do in the run game. But you can't, when you have younger guys that are excelling and you have a guy like Randy Pittman, who I think is going to be one of your top guys offensively going into this next season, Markeiston Douglas is a tight end 2B. I mean, I don't know much of outside of probably, blocking for you as much. Yes, he's shown signs that he can catch, but it's not a player that should be holding you hostage in any way, shape, or form. And God forbid, definitely, if he was able to negotiate more monetary money out of that. Like, I'm just trying to figure out Mike Norvell and the plan. Like you guys have been discussing here, there's a few other players that have done this in the years past. And I go back to DJ Lundy going and visiting. He's there in Colorado. He's doing photo shoots. And then boom, you're trying to make a big offer to bring him back. And I know at that time, yes, maybe you definitely did need some experience in the linebacker room for that, but I just don't understand the situation here with Markeiston Douglas. I mean, Mike Norvell, we heard him today. He actually had a press conference recapping the spring camp. As we know, that ended early due to the tragic events that happened at Florida State. But, he said we're excited for Markeiston to be a part of this program. He also mentioned that there was a lot of emotions that went into these discussions with Markeiston Douglas. But, maybe it could have been a discussion of where, a guy like Chase Lofton or Randy Pittman, those two guys had a nice spring as well. And you're not going to see a whole ton of playing time for Markeiston Douglas. And that's where you have straightforward conversations. That's something that Mike Norvell said a lot in this press conference today, that they are going to have true one-on-one, man-to-man serious conversations. And if that's actually true, then for Markeiston, bye. I don't. That's why I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out. Who knows? There's probably a lot, maybe some more things to it. But overall, as the program, as like we've been alluding to on the show, it gives it a pretty bad look for FSU and a pretty pivotal time for Mike Norvell after 2-10 last year, and you're going into facing Alabama to kick off the season and need to find wins and try to find momentum where it feels like right now after this spring that was a pretty blah kind of camp that I thought from what things we were hearing.
Yeah, and it just feels like just doesn't feel right, like that kind of move with what we've seen over the previous seasons. And you would hope eventually, and we're not privy to all of these discussions behind the scenes and everything, but just from the outward public view, it's not a good look on Florida State with the way this program has been trending for the last 16 months.
No.
And this is a guy that in 44 games over 4 years in his career has 26 catches and 329 yards. Why? What are we doing?
And that's where you can't be held hostage in any way, shape, or form. And we don't know. Maybe there was something that has not. If it has nothing to do with NIL and money, blah blah. But there, in this day and age of football and transfer portal, it's hard to not think that wouldn't be the case. But why would you be held hostage when we were hearing great things of growth from Chase Lofton? I think Randy Pittman's tied in right there with Landon Thomas. I think we're going to see a ton of Randy Pittman in 2025. That just doesn't make too much of sense. I'm at the point to where I'm ready to see some younger guys. We've talked about a lot of wide receiver attrition through the transfer portal from Florida State's roster. And I don't give a damn almost to see a true freshman start at the wide receiver position. I mean, whenever Mike Norvell first arrived, we saw Lake McLean get in there. One of the biggest reasons because he was a guy that did a lot of things outside of just his play. He did things that when in the run game, he was a good blocker as well on the outside, and he took care of his assignments. Is the reason why he started. But I think there's now a more need for a risk at some of these younger guys than relying on some of these veterans to hold you the way that they are doing currently. It's it just comes off strange. It certainly does. And Biscuit's back. Biscuit's back for this week.
Also, has Norvell ever described a player coming in as anything other than exciting? Like in every single press conference or statement he has about a player, we're excited to have him. Yeah, I would hope so. But can I get something that's not coach speak?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been pretty bare bones, and it's not been a lot of juice coming from Mike since last year in those pressers. I mean, the one that we were there in Miami for, that was the first time I was in person for him during that season after the Boston College game, the second game of the season. But seeing him in person, it's not the same person that Florida State hired in the early parts. So anyways, any last comments here on Markeiston Douglas? I didn't think that we'd have like a whole 15-minute intro for Biscuit, but here we are.
10 minutes on Biscuit's enough.
It is.
I think even with this situation, he's a guy who's primed, like we said earlier, to play a pretty big role on this offense at tight end alongside Landon Thomas. Chase Lofton also going to be working to get into that mix. I think, he's arguably the best natural receiver in that tight end room. It's just the size, being at 225 pounds, is a little bit of an issue along with him being a true freshman. But we saw Landon Thomas step in and show some immediate flashes last year. I could see a similar thing for Chase Lofton. And then Randy Pittman, he's going to get some time at that traditional tight end spot, but going to spend a whole lot of his reps at the H-back spot in this offense. So just going to be really interesting to see how Florida State kind of moves around these four guys. And, if Amari Williams gets included back into this conversation as well when we get to fall camp, because obviously the plan for him is to see some action on both sides.
Like you say, he's going to play a big role. His career high in receiving yards is 190. Do we think he breaks that this season? I don't know. It's tough to say right now with this passing attack. It looks, honestly, a little bleak on paper with what they have. Yeah. What they have in the receiving room, the injuries that decimated the offensive line during spring camp. We heard Thomas Castellanos had
some up and down moments, but it seemed like he finished the spring strong. But at least, from the standpoint of Markeiston, he's in the best shape of his career. And that's something we say about every player every offseason. But, you remember Markeiston Douglas came into Florida State at about 285 pounds. I mean, this was a jumbo tight end, not your traditional tight end size. And a couple weeks ago, he posted on Twitter, and he was down to, I think it was about 257 or so. And, he had mentioned in his introductory interview back in January, he wanted to become more of a receiving threat in this final year. And it seems like he's trying to get into the shape to do so. And, we'll just have to see if it works out.
But I don't know if FSU should want that. And that's why I'm like questioning the staff. Why would you want Markeiston Douglas to be that for you? Tell this player, this is exactly what we want you to do. This is how you're going to be. Not everybody can catch the goddamn ball.
I mean,
It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. You have Chase Lofton, who seems like is going to be really talented there and a good duo young piece with Landon Thomas. Randy Pittman is your versatile guy. You just lost your blocking tight ends, which weren't fantastic anyways, but Markeiston Douglas is good at that. Why are you trying to tell him to catch the ball? He doesn't need to catch the ball. If those are the emotional conversations you're having, got him. Doesn't make sense. Makes no sense to me.
Unless they're just planning on running a lot more 12 personnel, which isn't something that they've done a ton for passing plays. They've done it in run plays, especially in the early parts of Norvell's career, but lately it hasn't been a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field with both being receiving threats. So unless they're really changing the offense this year, which I don't think we're expecting it to be that pass heavy, I don't understand it whatsoever.
That makes sense to me. Anyways, there goes 16 minutes. We add a little bit more D-Lo.
Nah, we can just push through. Let's move on from Biscuit.
All right, let's move on here. Florida State added a quarterback through the transfer portal here with East Tennessee State quarterback Jalen King. In 2024, King played 12 games, 10 starts for ETSU. He completed 116 of 221 passes for 1,536 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. He also added 422 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns in total. One of his best games was against UVA Wise in September with 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 61-0 blowout win. He threw for a season high 268 yards with 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in a 31-28 win over Samford back in October. So y'all's thoughts on the addition here? Obviously, Florida State has what they need right now, and their QB1, QB2, and QB3, seems like from the quote from Mike Norvell, this Jalen King was a fan of Florida State, and seems like they just want to add a QB4. That's about it.
Yeah, not expecting much of an impact here, and you can kind of see it in that Norvell statement. I mean, he even mentioned it there at the end that there's a possibility that Jalen King redshirts this year, and I think he said as much in interviews that he's looking to go to a place where he can develop in 2025 and redshirt. This is a guy played 2 years at the college level. You just talked about his season at East Tennessee State, began his career at the in the FCS where he was at East Tennessee State, but started off at Gardner-Webb under head coach Trey Lamb, and then followed Lamb to East Tennessee State last year. Lamb departed for the head coaching job at Tulsa. I think we actually talked about him on this show whenever he hired Carter Barfield away from Florida State. But anyway, that sent King into the transfer portal. He's been looking for a home. And, it's funny because last week on this show, we were talking about Trevor Jackson, and Austin was wondering who's going to run the scout team in 2025. And, Mike Norvell must have been listening. He got your answer about a week later because you got Jalen King coming in here. And I would imagine, that's going to be his primary duties to contribute to this team in 2025 is to run that scout team and try to emulate the quarterbacks that FSU will be going up against next fall.
Yeah, I was looking at the schedule to see how many dual threat quarterbacks they might be facing. I think his biggest impact is going to be in the middle of November when they get ready to play Virginia Tech and Kyron Jones. Other than that, they don't really play a ton of dual threat quarterbacks. I guess you can count DJ Lagway as dual threat, but I don't really view him in that light. I think he's more of a pocket passer. Yeah. It's really going to be just that Kyron Jones game that they're really going to have to prep for, I think.
That's going to be a big week for King. Big week. All right, let's move on to a big addition here, one that I think we all are pretty high on for Florida State and the defensive background. We're actually talking about, some needs for Florida State in some positions, and we discussed the secondary and the cornerback position. And here's one that Florida State landed with Houston DB transfer Jeremiah Wilson, 5'10", 185-pound cornerback from Kissimmee, Florida here in the state of Florida. He played 34 games with 13 starts across Syracuse and Houston over 3 seasons, a veteran guy with a ton of experience. In 2024 at Houston, he played in 12 games, 8 starts, 24 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, and 4 PBUs, third in the Big 12 in picks. He also had a pick 6 against Baylor and some other interceptions against Oklahoma and Kansas State. He earned an 86.9 PFF defensive grade, 4th among all Power 4 cornerbacks. Thoughts on this addition here? Obviously, some ties here with him being at Syracuse and Tony White as Florida State's new defensive coordinator, but seems like a guy that can get to the ball as a ball hawk and can get the ball taken away, which is something that Florida State heavily needs on the defensive side moving forward.
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it all. This is a really excellent pickup for Florida State. They chose not to pursue any DBs really that heavily during the winter portal window. And after going through spring practice, it seems like it became apparent that they'd like to add another experienced player to that cornerback room. And they're also looking into a safety who we'll talk about in a little bit. But Wilson, we discussed him last week, and you just brought it up. He's got that previous relationship with Tony White dating back to Syracuse. That was obviously huge in this transfer recruitment. And then I think the biggest thing is he has 3 years of experience playing cornerback in a 3-3-5 defense. I mean, he instantly becomes one of the most experienced players on this roster in that new scheme that Tony White is bringing to Florida State. And obviously he already played in it for a year when he was with the Orange a couple of seasons ago. And, now I think you're looking at him obviously as a likely starter at one of those cornerback spots. And you've got some other, guys like Quindarius Jones, Jabril Rawls, Charles Lester, Kai Bates, Ricky Knight, Shamar Arnu competing for some other spots there. Obviously one starting spot now up for grabs, and, a lot of time in that rotation as well. So we'll see how it works out during fall camp. But Jeremiah Wilson, coming in with 1 season of eligibility remaining, with what he's been able to do as far as taking the ball away, I think it could be very useful and beneficial for a Florida State defense that struggled heavily in that facet in 2024.
Yeah, this is something we can actually realistically be excited about for the first time, I feel like, in 4 months. This room, the cornerback room, needed some experience. We talked about it even going back to the end of the season where, yeah, we feel good about some of the talent in that room, but they kind of need an experienced guy just to bring them along. And this is a perfect fit, guy that's one of the top 10 returning corners in college football, according to PFF. I think it's a good fit, especially with the Florida State's probably going to have to win games this year, and it's going to have to rely heavily on the defense. This is someone you needed.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that we have some listeners that are keeping up with the latest news, because there was some earlier today with Florida State adding into Herb Hand's offensive line room with Rutgers offensive line transfer Jalen Matthews. And this is a young kid, really young freshman, but 6'5", 295 pounds, someone that Florida State is going to be able to utilize for years to come, hopefully, and to be able to develop with Herb Hand. But I know there's not a whole ton of stuff to go off of at the college level, but Florida State doing their due diligence and trying to bring in some extra room. As we're seeing, Herb Hand all across the board, we're seeing some tackles too that Florida State is interested in, and more offensive linemen, and adding some depth into the inside of its front trenches. But, what are y'all's thoughts on this pickup that happened not too long ago?
I think the biggest thing that's interested me is it seems like Florida State's transfer portal strategy is shifting a little bit, because you add in Jalen Matthews, and I believe that brings Florida State up to 103 out of 105 roster spots. But they're still pursuing, 5, 6, maybe even 7 other guys in the portal right now, potential additions to this roster. And, obviously the House settlement and all of that is ongoing to, institute the roster limits at 105. But it seems like they've kind of had a little bit of a hang up because, like we've been talking about for months with the rosters going down, obviously players, a lot of them being walk-ons, are essentially being forced off rosters and into the portal, having to find new homes. And it seems like there could be a little bit of a waiver or a temporary situation to try and get these roster limits down to 105 instead of just doing it all at once. And, that would mean obviously Florida State could go over that number into the 2025 season. So we'll just have to see how it works out. But yeah, bringing in Jalen Matthews, New Jersey native, I think it's a little interesting that he decided to go from Rutgers, which is in New Jersey, close to his hometown, here to Florida State. And now this is the fifth true freshman offensive lineman that the Seminoles will be fielding under new offensive line coach Herb Hand. Not sure that we're going to see a lot out of him in 2025, but obviously a promising potential prospect for the future for Florida State at offensive tackle.
Yeah, I was going to mention
6'6", 340.
6'6", 340.
I was going to mention the New Jersey part as well, because when he committed to Rutgers 10-ish months ago, he said in an article to Yahoo Sports, "I'm ready to play for the home state and be a hometown hero." He was at Rutgers for 4 months, so that wasn't much of a hometown hero.
They didn't need the hero there. He's a hero now here.
And besides that, the part that's been floating around this morning is this gift that he has that he can diagnose genders and pregnancies. It's kind of weird. NewJersey.com did an article about it last year. If he can diagnose genders and pregnancies better than he can diagnose a blitz, I'm gonna be upset. But we'll see how he develops, I guess.
Wait, take us through some context here, because I'd rather spend more time on this than the Markeiston Douglas conversation.
His mom did an interview for NewJersey.com, and she said Jalen is gifted, and not just on the field. He has what the world would call intuition. Blah, 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 blah. I've been pregnant 11 times and have soon to be 8 kids to show for it. So being my firstborn, he's been in a lot of doctor's offices. Jalen has pointed to women and said, "Oh, you're carrying a boy," and he was right. "Oh, you're carrying a girl," and he was right every time.
Every time. Could make for a fun NIL deal. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, you're bringing that up in the production meeting there, Dustin. Maybe you should be his agent for that.
Hit me up, Jalen.
Not for the food deals, because that one's too easy. But this one, you could really go an extensive.
DM's open.
Yeah, DMs are open. But yeah, good. I think just for someone that they can develop. Obviously, Herb Hand sees something there in him. So we'll see what ends up happening there with Jalen Matthews from Rutgers. Dustin, I know we were talking in the production meeting about some names that Florida State is interested in, or also to getting some visits from. If you want to feel free, the floor is yours on some of those guys to keep a close eye on.
Yeah, I'll try to run through this relatively quick since none of these guys are committed yet. But, Florida State obviously pretty deep into that wide receiver market in the portal. Right now have missed out on at least 3 of the options that they were pursuing. And, we talked about a couple of them last week. Trayshawn Hurry committing to Louisville. Then you had Keelan Marion committing to Miami. And most recently, yesterday, actually, Cincinnati wide receiver transfer Tony Johnson committed to Miami over Florida State, which is pretty disappointing considering the need at wide receiver in Tallahassee. And also, FSU got the last visit for Tony Johnson over the weekend. And then it seemed like the Hurricanes kind of swooped in and were able to win out on that recruitment. So, I mean, that is Florida State going even further into the portal. And now they're taking a look at North Carolina wide receiver transfer Gavin Blackwell. It has spent the last 4 seasons with the Tar Heels. I think at the most, you can call him a veteran. He's got some experience at the college level, about 400 receiving yards or so. And I mean, that would instantly make him the third most experienced wide receiver on Florida State's roster. He's supposed to be in for a visit later this week, 1 season of eligibility remaining. So we'll see how that goes. And then you also have redshirt freshman Vanderbilt offensive lineman transfer Josh Raymond. He's currently on campus right now. And, like we talked about, Florida State bringing in a young offensive line prospect in Jalen Matthews. And, with the way that these roster limits are working, I'm wondering if they're going to do the same here with Josh Raymond. This is a guy played in the All-American game coming out of high school. He was a 2024 signee, also a Florida native, signed with Vanderbilt. Didn't see any game action last season in the SEC with the Commodores. And like I said, FSU had him on campus Tuesday and Wednesday. So, we'll see if he decides to choose the Seminoles. A recent one that hit the portal and one with some ties to Florida State, safety Jacoby Thomas, I can't even speak, from Tennessee. And, he's a veteran guy, began his career at Middle Tennessee State, where he played under FSU offensive director of scouting Rick Stockstill for a couple of years. And, after the Blue Raiders decided to move on from Stockstill, he hit the portal, landed at Tennessee for a year. And, now he's back in looking for a home for his final season of eligibility, and reportedly only going to take transfer portal visits to Miami and Florida State. So this is another one where the Seminoles are right up there against the Hurricanes. And, the biggest thing is going to be seeing if they can actually get him to Tallahassee. I think that Miami visit is supposed to happen first. So Florida State going to be trying to get him in and, potentially make an addition to that safety room. You've also got Monmouth defensive end Miles Mitchell, a productive option from the FCS level. He's supposed to be visiting Florida State later this week. And then from the D2 level, you've got offensive lineman Jalen Caldwell, a redshirt junior. So he'll have 2 seasons of eligibility remaining, including 2025. And, this is kind of the opposite of a guy like Josh Raymond or the other guy that we're talking about.
Yeah.
He's got some experience. He can instantly enter that rotation for Florida State in 2025, maybe contribute as a swing tackle or maybe even interior guy. We'll see how it works out if he does choose the Seminoles. And then finally, this was reported by Noles 247's Zach Blostein, but Oklahoma running back Gavin Sawchuk is expected to visit Florida State later this week. And, he's a veteran. Was banged up a little bit in 2024, but you look back at that 2023 season, 120 rushes, 744 yards, 9 touchdowns, also had 14 catches for 94 yards. I mean, he's been a productive guy for the last 3 seasons for the Sooners. Actually, you go back to 2022, and this is a guy who played against Florida State in that Cheez-It Bowl victory for the Seminoles over Oklahoma, which, I mean, that was a heck of a game, an exciting comeback for FSU to erase that deficit against Oklahoma and win there. But, Sawchuk is a guy who would add a little something different to Florida State's running back room, potentially make a little bit more dynamic, explosive. And, Florida State could potentially use that addition after spring practice where, we didn't hear necessarily the highest things about that backfield.
I was going to say for Sawchuk, and that game, he had 15 carries against FSU, 100 yards on the ground, and averaged 6.7 yards per carry, and had a 25-yard run as well, and a touchdown in that game. But, I think with us hearing things about the spring and Florida State, I think we're hearing the most. We heard about it from Mike Norvell today in the press conference, talking about Jalen Lucas and Roydell Williams, seeing the growth from Roydell. But it seems like the theme right now is Jalen Lucas. And if Jalen Lucas, there's no, knock on Jalen Lucas, no shade, nothing there. I think he's going to play a big role in what Florida State needs to do successfully in this offense next season. But that shouldn't be your RB1. And to not see the strides or dimension of Cam Davis from Mike Norvell in that presser today, recapping the spring, when talking specifically about the running back room, it's a little concerning. And so this is why, Florida State is looking here. And, I know you have a really talented guy with Usman Chroma coming this summer, but it's one of my biggest concerns after leaving the spring, gentlemen. All right, let's jump over real quick. Just wanted to mention this. Don't need to deep dive into it because we've got a lot else to jump into for the rest of this episode. Before we get going, though, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, too, if you're with us on YouTube. Also, too, I see a lot of y'all in the chat, very active. Appreciate you guys. Throw in some comments or any kind of questions or topics you guys would like us to discuss. As we usually do, we'll bring it up on the screen and we'd love to chat about it. But real quick, I wanted to mention FSU linebacker Tamir Hickman-Collins has entered the transfer portal there. I don't think this is too much of a shocker, nor to a major loss for Florida State's linebacker room. I did not expect to see much of a presence from him. I just didn't expect much from him. And the initial part of him joining the team. VZ, you go more on that because you love this.
Yeah, this was a Randy Shannon special, is what we like to call this. The 3-star hyphenated linebacker that nobody knows who he is, and then he lasts a year on campus, 2 years on campus, doesn't hardly play, and is gone. So appreciate it, Randy Shannon. Thanks for being gone.
Yeah, I mean, redshirted during his first year at Florida State, signed as a 3-star prospect in that 2024 class. I think last year, for the most part, was just contributing on the scout team and things of that nature. And you look at that linebacker room. Florida State obviously pretty stacked up there at the top. And if a guy like Tamir Hickman-Collins wants to play early in his college career, the signs have shown that it's just going to have to be elsewhere. And he decided to hit that portal and find somewhere else. So we'll see where he lands.
By the way, these were his other offers coming out of high school: Georgia Tech, Charlotte, and Charleston Southern. Anytime you can beat those schools out, you got to do it.
There you go. That's something.
Georgia Tech, not bad.
It's not exactly redeeming.
Not at that time.
Good academics.
It's turned around. There you have great academics. Engineering, right? Big engineering school. Head up to Atlanta. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, let's move on, gentlemen. Let's talk about some guys that have found new homes. I'm interested to see the comments in the YouTube chat for this. Where do we start off with here? I think we got to go with number one, which happened yesterday officially, with old Hakeem Williams, former FSU 5-star wide receiver.
Oh, where'd he go?
Headed, huh?
Where'd he go?
Into prime time, baby. He's heading to Boulder. He's going skiing. They better have some good gloves up there, I'll tell you that right now. Not just because it's cold, but it's going to help you catch. Hakeem Williams is heading to Colorado, baby. He's joining Dion. It's going to be a changed player up there. Thoughts on this one here? It was pretty funny, and I'll pull up the graphic in a minute. But while y'all discuss that, just first initial thoughts on Hakeem heading over to Boulder.
I mean, that graphic's really the only thing I got to say about it. An iconic quote from Hakeem Williams came back to bite him and Florida State in the process. And now I believe Hakeem is the 5th player from Florida State's roster to transfer to Colorado since the spring of 2023.
It's got to be more than that, right?
I've got.
I guess we're going back further than that.
No, the spring of 2023 is when it all started. Derek McClendon, Marion Cooper, Travis J, Bishop Thomas, and now I've got Hakeem.
Feels like it's more than that.
It did feel like it was more. I was looking back at it, I'm like, am I sure there's not more? But I think he was the 5th one. And, obviously didn't really work out so great for the other 4. So I'll be following the journey.
Yeah, unless Colorado has some magical athletic training staff that can help keep him healthy, I don't think this is going to matter.
There you go. Here's the graphic here for our audio listeners. This is a quote whenever he had an interview with On3, sending a message saying, "Ain't no Travis Hunter over here. We locked in. Time to work." And then during that time, too, Travis Hunter quoted that and said, "Could never be me," laughing face emojis. And then down below, Hakeem responded to that, "You right," laughing emoji. "I'm solid." So pretty funny stuff here going on. I just don't. It's pretty funny to me. I think it's hilarious.
List the names again real quick, Dustin. That you had?
You want me to do it again?
Yeah.
Derek McClendon, Bishop Thomas, Travis J, Marion Cooper, Hakeem Williams.
Yeah, you missed Brendan Gant. That's who you're missing.
Oh, Brendan Gant. Yep. I was wrong.
Gant.
So
all right, 6.
0 for 6.
Can't miss out on Brendan Gant, man. There's a question on here on Zaquan Patterson. We're getting hit with that a lot today. Update on that, on Zaquan Patterson?
Yeah, entered the portal from Miami this spring. Is coming off his first season with the Hurricanes, and I mean, this is a guy very highly regarded coming out of high school. I think some services, maybe all of them, had him as a 5-star prospect. But I mean, this is a guy who at least was in that top 100 across the majority of the recruiting services. And Florida State recruited him heavily in high school, hosted him for a couple of visits before he committed to Miami. And, someone that didn't necessarily see a lot of the field for the Hurricanes in 2024, but someone that is on Florida State's radar. And, we mentioned that they're going after a safety option already, and Jacoby Thomas from Tennessee. I think if things go south in that recruitment and Thomas does end up choosing the Hurricanes over Florida State, then Zaquan Patterson is going to be someone that Florida State potentially circles back on to add to that safety room. So, I mean, someone on the board, but I would say that he's probably more of a B option right now for FSU.
Well, they'll want to hurry up on that because he's already visited Florida and Ole Miss. So,
and that's kind of the problem with this one is it's going to be a big NIL recruitment, as you can see where some of those visits have been. And I don't know if Florida State necessarily wants to or is able to get into a bidding war with those schools right now, especially, like I said, for a guy like Zaquan Patterson who didn't play much for Miami last year.
The bag already went to biscuit, baby. What are you talking about? It's over. Budget. Got a budget around here, D-Lou. Come on. I know we commented, I think, last week on the show about Trevor Jackson visiting Arkansas, but it didn't take long whatsoever. He committed to Arkansas, so he's over there with the Razorbacks. And then Jordan Scott, who most recently left Florida State, did not spend a whole lot of time, just spent the spring with the Seminoles. Wide receiver, he's headed to Maryland. And then Aaron Hester is certainly hopefully going to get some more playing time here. He's headed over to Liberty, which I don't know. I want these guys, for Aaron Hester, I think he gave as much as he possibly could. It's just a situation. How many guys were transferring in and becoming immediate starters at defensive end room? I don't blame him. I'm glad he's actually going to a place. I mean, Liberty, not a bad school to go play ball, but somewhere where he can get a bigger opportunity to get a starting opportunity is something that I think is best for him. And I thought this should have happened. I think he was a year too late, but now he's getting this opportunity. And then another name real quick, one that I know VZ was sad about whenever entered the portal, but George Wilson, you need to know this update. George Wilson is headed to South Carolina with the Gamecocks. I needed you to know that.
After spending 1 year or 2 years with the Campbell Fighting Camels?
2 years.
2 years. He should just stay there because the Fighting Camels is too good of a mascot to leave.
But now he's headed to the Gamecocks, baby, heading to the SEC.
That was odd.
Yeah, really emphasize that a little bit. But it was funny. I'm stealing this from Reddit, but someone on Reddit mentioned that George Wilson had committed to South Carolina back when he was in high school, and then they ended up firing Muschamp, and that's when he decommitted and ended up signing with Florida State. But they're like committed in 2025 or committed in 2020, enrolled in 2025, just like we planned.
Yep, it was all playing along. But yeah, those are some updates there on some former Seminoles finding new homes. Let's jump into the NFL draft, gentlemen, because this was fun. I was at a wedding. Dustin also was at a wedding. So work-wise was not the easiest, but shout out to our staffs all across the board. They did a great job with us not being able to be so hands-on. But Florida State had 2 guys drafted. We're going to talk about it right now. AZ was selected in the 3rd round, 73rd overall, to the Jets, teaming up with Sauce Gardner on the other side, along with some FSU former guys, Jermaine Johnson, Jordan Travis, Derek Noddy, Pokey Wilson, and now also Lawrence Toafili getting invited over there to a rookie mini camp himself. And then Joshua Farmer selected in the 4th round, 137th pick, to Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots. I think we all on this show were in that same range of that 2nd to 3rd round there for AZ. I know some were expecting for him maybe to be a late 1st or early 2nd, but I think that 2nd to 3rd is not a bad one. I wonder too if the combine it wasn't a bad showing, but not running the 40. I don't know if that altered any kind of things for him.
And then
But
the 4.58 40 at his pro day definitely didn't help because they mentioned it on every broadcast.
Yeah, that of course did not help as well. And he's a longer ranging guy, and things don't look the most smooth whenever you're doing these kind of workouts and such. But when you put on the pads, and he's more of a physical guy too, at the line, things make up for that. But thoughts on these two gentlemen heading to the pros?
Yeah, we kind of projected it last week. They both fell a little bit further than I thought they would, but I mean, I really like AZ landing with the Jets and kind of continuing those Seminole bloodlines that are growing there. I mean, Jets now have the most former FSU players on the roster, and we'll see if a guy like LT can crack that 90-man roster as well. And then Joshua Farmer, that was an interesting one. And the Patriots, to me, might have had the most intriguing draft of any team out there. Well, especially in the later rounds, I believe they drafted a kicker, and I think they drafted a long snapper as well. So I mean, they're just going all in, all over the board for Mike Vrabel's first year as the head coach. So
I mean, they had like 12 picks. Might as well.
I guess I just
got to do whatever you can.
I feel like it's very rare. It is very rare that you see a long snapper get drafted and a kicker by the same team.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think both ended up on the latter half of their projections from where they were expected to go. I think AZ is in a great spot, though. You mentioned being on the opposite side of Sauce Gardner. They just lost DJ Reed in free agency to Detroit this offseason, so he's got a chance to start right away on the other side of Sauce Gardner. Farmer, we'll see how he works into that rotation. Obviously, they spent a lot of money on Milton Williams this offseason. Christian Barmore's had some health issues the last few years, so he may have a chance to step in and play right away. But it's not surprising to see those two be the only guys drafted as well.
Nope. I like Vrabel as a coach too. So he's someone that runs a strict operation, and I think that works well for Joshua Farmer.
And apparently there's some medical concerns with Farmer. Apparently that's why he lasted on the board a little bit longer than a lot of people were expecting, because people like Daniel Jeremiah had him in like the top 60 or 70 or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, we've known that for a while. He's been dealing with that hand injury for quite a bit, and I wonder if he's been able to fully recover from that. And even if it wasn't, fully recovered yet, but still going back and looking at the records of what he's been having to deal with on a year-to-year basis, I'm sure made to an effect of maybe him dropping a little bit too as well. But yeah, I mean, New York Noles up there with those guys. And two, it's going to be interesting to keep a close eye. They got a new coach up there with Glenn, but also seeing what they want to do with Jordan Travis as well. Of course, you've got my former quarterback with Justin Fields over there, but interested to see if Jordan Travis can get fully recovered and get back and in some type of form there, because I know Florida State fans would love to see some success in the league for number 13.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to note real quick, just an interesting little tidbit about Farmer landing with the Patriots, is that former FSU senior analyst Clint McMillian is actually the defensive line coach for the Patriots, or the assistant defensive line coach. And he didn't coach at FSU when Farmer was in Tallahassee, but he was here the previous season. He was part of the staff during Mike Norvell's first year in 2020. And then since then has been in the NFL with the Tennessee Titans, actually, worked with Vrabel during his stint there, and then now reunited with him in New England.
Mm-hmm. Good note there. All right, let's jump through some guys that have either been signed as undrafted free agents or been invited to rookie minicamp. So I'll go down the line here. We'll start off with Ryan Fitzgerald, someone that we were keeping a close eye on, potentially getting drafted as well, but got a nice undrafted free agent offer from the Carolina Panthers. So he is signed there with them, heading to the NFC South, going over to a quarterback, DJU, signed with the Chargers as an undrafted free agent.
Do you have the total for what he signed for?
2,000?
3,000.
3,000. Hey,
that made me laugh. That made me laugh. I'm not gonna lie.
Solid NIL deal.
There you go. Another one of those Circle K deals, baby. Let's go. Jeremiah Byers headed to the Arizona Cardinals, teaming up there with Trey Benson. He can block for Trey Benson, VZ.
Good luck.
It worked out in 2023.
Trey Benson saved a lot of those, and
if you say
that
so.
guy we were just talking about, Jordan Travis, I think that did all that for him. All right, Fentrell Cypress though is getting a really good opportunities with the Washington Commanders, which they are trying to find some secondary help. So he's signed an undrafted free agent deal with them up in Washington.
And
Kevin
also
Knowles
played at Virginia, obviously. So I mean, not too far away
back
from
home.
there.
Yeah, not getting back to his old roots up there. Kevin Knowles signed with the Kansas City Chiefs
On
as
a
an
decent
undrafted free agent.
decent chunk too.
Yeah.
$20K signing bonus with $200K guaranteed salary.
That one surprised me.
Okay,
They must have they saw him in the vert jump. They're like, oh yeah, we gotta have this guy. Don't
Yeah,
watch the film. Don't
they
watch
had
the
to
film.
they had to have someone there at that pro day because I think, I mentioned afterwards, I thought Kevin Knowles looked really explosive out there. And, now the veteran defender after 4 years at Florida State, he's going to get a shot in the league with the Chiefs.
I hope, I'm pulling for Kevin Knowles here, but I hope that this is VZ's Scotty Barnes is what it was for Dustin. I'm hoping. I'm pulling for it.
It's a lot worse for me.
It'd be an awesome story.
Kevin Knowles is an undrafted free agent. Scotty Barnes was the 4th pick.
And won Rookie of the Year immediately.
Just to make the team, we're all on that.
Honestly, I want him to be a great player. He was coming out of that first spring game. He was one of my favorite players on the defense. He just never developed because a guy with the last name Knowles, you want him to be good for the Knowles, and he never panned out.
It's someone that should have taken way more full of an advantage of the NIL game.
Absolutely,
I thought he was going to go all in on that, but did not happen. So we'll see. He can still do War Chant up there. He can still do it up there with the Chiefs.
Yeah. Good.
Yep.
That's a good point.
Ja'Kai Douglas was invited to a rookie mini camp with the New York Giants, who just had a big old draft as well for them. And then former FSU linebacker Cam Riley, get an opportunity with the New England Patriots, going over there with Mike Vrabel.
And I think he signed a UDFA deal, not a tryout.
Nice. And then Greedy Vance has signed former FSU DB, played last year with USC. He's getting an opportunity to go get a signing with the Raiders over there in Vegas. Maurice Smith up there in Washington with the Commanders, invited to the rookie mini camp. Kyle Morlock invited to the Giants rookie mini camp. VZ.
I didn't see that one.
You didn't see that one?
I did not see that.
Come on.
G-Men, that I can tell you now, that's not going to last long. Hope you don't have high expectations.
Just don't throw it past to him.
Unless he spent the last 6 months sleeping in front of a jugs machine with his hands up, just catching footballs in his sleep. Yeah, this won't last long.
Jeez. I would actually put my betting odds favored to where he would catch there sleeping than having it look right into his eyes.
I would too.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Hard Rock, get it loaded up, baby. Get it loaded up. Here's one heading to Tampa Bay down here with me with the Buccaneers. Winston Wright Jr. You might remember that name. He spent some time there with West Virginia and had a really nice 40-yard. He looks like a whole different guy. Seems like he's fully healthy, which is a good sign. Specialist kind of guy. He's getting invited to the Bucs rookie mini camp, so looking forward to seeing him down here in Tampa. But if I don't know, I tweeted a little while ago, but his body has completely changed. He's a big boy and also ran a 4.43, I think it was. I don't know. I have to look at the tweet, but yeah, he ran really fast in his pro day. And then to finish it off, ladies and gentlemen, Darius Washington.
First team All ACC 2023.
That's right. Darius Washington invited to the Broncos rookie mini camp. Shout out to Sean Payton. You still have me blocked, you son of a gun. But getting an opportunity up there. Gonna have to get used to that. The breathing up there. That altitude is a little bit different. But any last comments on these guys getting these opportunities?
Yes, I do want to comment on Ryan Fitzgerald and this kicking battle that will ensue
Yeah.
with Matthew Wright. I was curious about this. Like, I just want to see, like, how good of a chance does Ryan Fitzgerald have of making the Panthers roster? So they signed this guy, Matthew Wright, in the offseason. And since 2019, Matthew Wright has been on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 rosters.
Since when?
Since 2019.
Jesus.
He started out with the Steelers, got cut, re-signed with the Steelers, then the Lions, then the Jags, then the Chiefs, then back to the Steelers, back to the Chiefs, Panthers, 49ers, Falcons, Patriots, back to the Panthers, back to the Steelers, back to the 49ers, back to the Chiefs, Titans, and now back to the Panthers again.
You're not allowed to unpack that suitcase.
So
Where does
Fitzgerald,
he stay?
he stays in his car. There is no way he does it.
He's driving to all these places and not flying about.
He's got like an RV.
I saw that like, Fitz, you got to win this one, man.
Holy moly.
He's in Jacksonville. Oh, back to Pittsburgh.
Back on the road again.
However, he did win a Super Bowl with the Chiefs, I guess.
So he's got a ring on that finger, huh?
He does have a ring on that finger.
Hell yeah. That can work well on Hinge and Tinder. Hell yeah. That'll work. But yeah, so that good luck to all of those guys. Interested to see how things work for them. How do you feel like your team did, VZ, in the draft? How you feeling?
Can I just bring up the guys who haven't signed with teams real quick?
Oh, this is actually probably more notable than anything. If DJ, you can get a spot.
So Florida State had 18 players participate at Pro Day. A couple of, in March. A couple of these guys haven't signed yet. Devontae Brown.
I forgot he was on last year.
This is a bad idea with VZ. You're gonna need to mute your mic and like turn your camera off.
Sione Lolohea.
That one surprises me. I'm not gonna lie.
DJ Lundy.
Doesn't surprise me.
Kentron Poitier.
Maybe. VZ's muted.
And I think this is the most surprising one is Alex Mastermano has yet to receive a shot from an NFL team after, earning All-American honors a season ago.
I imagine with him it's more the punting style than anything.
He punts high and far. I mean, what else do you want?
I don't know, man. I'm trying to think of something without being mean to some of the other players. Yeah. I'm trying not to be mean to the other players.
They're just jealous of his accent.
Yeah.
Well, that can't be true because the Vikings signed an Australian punter. And the NFL has this new international program where if you sign someone that came through these international waters, which I don't know if he went to the international NFL camps or not. I'd really have to go back and look. I don't think he did. But you can kind of get roster either bonuses or waivers or whatever with signing some of these guys.
Oh yeah.
So we'll just have to see, but imagine he'll get a shot. Sorry.
I would hope so.
I hope so. Absolutely. I saw him. He was up there in the combine. I was chatting with him for a little bit. I was asking him which teams he talked to, and he said he talked to a lot of them. I said, which ones? He said, I don't really remember.
Well, that's not good. They probably called his phone. He's like, spam.
Oh God, but no, he'll get an opportunity.
I can answer this.
Put that bag up. Put that bag up. But yeah, I think my Steelers did pretty decent. I like the defensive lineman pickup there. It was tragic to hear the story about his mom, who after he got drafted, he immediately went over to where she was on life support and told her told her that, hey, I'm heading to the NFL. I got picked by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the next day she passes. But I'm really pulling for that kid and excited to see him line up next to my boy Cam Hayward, and then we got Will Howard. Thank God we did not get Shador. Oh my God, I would have lost my mind. I was really worried because I don't know what to expect anymore from Mike Tomlin and Amar Khan, our general manager, but I would have lost everything. I would have lost it all. And that probably wouldn't have been a good time with unlimited drinks happening up there for that wedding over the weekend. I would have been an emotional wreck. So we got Will Howard. I like him. Big Ben says he likes him. That's the goatest of the goats. We're good.
Okay.
We're good. We're fine. We don't even need Aaron Rodgers.
I think you do.
I've heard people say that your slander is the reason why Sanders fell so far.
Think so?
That's just what I've heard people say.
That was a little while before the first round. Word gets around, man. Twitter.
Derek Harmon was someone I wanted in Minnesota. And that was a good pick by Pittsburgh at 21. If he had fell a couple spots, I would have wanted Minnesota to get him. The Vikings they entered the draft with 4 picks and left with 5. So I mean, there wasn't too much they could do. They got Donovan Jackson in the first round. I guess that's fine.
Yeah, that's okay. Let's jump up and finish off the show here. I want to watch a little bit here of this John Gruden video. I know it's gone viral in a lot of different places, but if you haven't seen it yet, also to our audio listeners, this is Gruden. He gets sent a lot of packages from schools across the country and got sent one, really 2, from both Mike Norvell and to Link Jarrett, Florida State's baseball coach. And I just thought this video was I highly suggest doing so. But if not, stay with us because we're going to put it here on the stream for you guys.
Hey, we allowed to play this?
Look at this one, man.
Who cares? We're not making any money off of it.
It's from the Florida State Seminoles.
We got to work on the war chant.
Some of my favorite.
His assistant comes in and helps him with it at the end.
Florida State. Right. And one of the best people, the greatest coaches of all time that I have in the FFCA, Bobby freaking Bowden is the man.
It's a great picture frame there.
Every time Bobby Bowden said, hey, Brad Johnson.
That did not look like Bobby Bowden.
To him. And we won a Super Bowl.
I thought the same thing.
Coach is a great linebacker. Damn right he is. Leroy Butler, Green Bay Packers, when I was there. Hall of Fame.
Poor box is getting smacked.
Work done. I mean, these guys I got to coach. All because of Bobby Bowden.
It's like
now looking at the photo.
It's like painting your hand drawn or something.
Deion Sanders. How about Xavier Rhodes? How about Derwin James? How about this knife? How about Jalen Ramsey? How about the secondary that they had at Florida State? I got to be careful here.
It's a dangerous knife for someone like John Gruden.
Yeah, I need that knife.
Florida State Seminoles. How about Snoop Minnis? Remember that receiver?
This was my favorite part of this whole video.
Winston
Name dropping
and Chris
Snoop
Winky
Minnis.
winning Heisman trophies.
Yeah.
Did you know I coached the Raiders at one time? And my receiver coach was Hall of Famer Fred Biletnikoff. Where do you think he went? And then my favorite movie of all time. Ask me, Jake, what is it?
What's your favorite movie?
The Longest Yard, the original, starring Burt Reynolds. Where did Burt Reynolds go? Florida State. You know how I listen to a lot of classic rock? And you know who one of my favorite classic rock band is? It's The Doors. Lead singer, Jim Morrison. You know where he went? Florida State. Is this the greatest iconic helmet of all time? Look at this. Look at these little hatchets on the back. Andre Wadsworth, Corey Simon.
We got to work on
Timmy
that, John.
Jernigan, Bullware. Think of the guys.
There goes Logan's favorite moment with the Timmy Jernigan name drop.
I mean, good Lord.
Damn baby.
Another helmet. No wonder it was so healthy. Look at this. Anquan freaking Bolden. Did you ever see the block he made that put him in the playoffs in San Diego when they beat the Chargers on 4th and 36? Nobody would have done that but Anquan Bolden. This is an iconic freaking brand. Florida State. Look at this. Go get Bobby, will you? We got Bobby here. Who's your favorite team?
The Florida State.
What do you think of that? Hold that. Here.
Man's
What do you
getting
think of
gifted
this?
all the stuff.
What do you think of Mike Norvell bringing the Noles back? You
Let's
love it,
go,
don't you?
baby. Let's go.
What do you think of that?
Doesn't
my
sound very
gorgeous.
excited.
What is the school color exactly? Tell me.
Garnet and gold, baby.
Garnet and gold. This is a great.
Love how he says gold and holds up a
Hold that
white
high
shoe.
and tight. Look at these. Look
Yeah.
at this stuff we got. I mean, how about this? Number one.
That Kentron's jersey? All right.
I gotta tell you, it's from the equipment staff, and that's one of my favorite hats right away. The shoes, look at that. What size shoe do you wear?
Definitely 2 left shoes.
Just too bad. Too bad.
Doesn't even answer the size.
And then they got the gloves. Oh, put those on. Let's see if they don't make a difference. I mean, you know Walter Jones playing left tackle for the Seattle Seahawks? He could come out of his stance right now better than the guys that are in this draft. God, did he put some tape out there for people.
Jeez.
How about Dalvin Cook, Sammy Smith, freaking Even
Another
Cam
great
Akers.
name drop.
I
Sammy
mean, the
Smith.
amount of
How many
running backs.
names?
Amp Lee. Look at the people here.
How many
You know,
names?
Terrell
We need
Buckley,
to
he's
have a
probably
name
laughing
counter
right
for how
now
many
looking at me.
FSU names
holding
John
this
Gruden has
here.
put out.
I mean, hell,
video.
I might even go listen to some Rita Coolidge. She went to Florida State.
Wow.
This is people
Look at
that
this.
didn't even play football.
Can you imagine this? Can you imagine having all this stuff here?
You don't have to imagine it. You've
That's
got
a
it.
video. But
He really
That-
did come up with the most genius way to never have to purchase clothes again.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
I'm jealous of him, honestly.
I'm like, where does he put all that though? He's got to have a huge warehouse here
I don't
somewhere.
know.
in
He
Tampa.
probably just keeps them in the office.
Just
Boxes just stacked.
boxes. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty funny video. If you want to watch all the rest of it, you can watch it on our Instagram at NoleGameday. Put the whole thing up there and an Instagram reel for you guys. But I think that's going to do it for the rest of this episode here on Hear the Spear. We had a lot to discuss. If you're still here with us on YouTube, hit that like button. We would deeply appreciate it if you would. Also, to hit the subscribe button, hit that bell next to right there. Yeah, just where Dustin's pointing. Hit that like button. Trying to get to 50 likes on this would be friggin' phenomenal. So appreciate you guys a ton hanging out with us during these afternoon shows, and we will see you next week on Hear the Spear. Peace.